He'd been speaking to the same man for nearly a month. The chats felt easy. A few photos were exchanged, plans made, and nothing out of the ordinary. That evening, he left his flat and made his way to a meeting spot. It was quiet, just after midnight. The kind of silence that makes everything feel a little more exposed. He was in the right place at the worst time. Then, he noticed movement, figures stepping out from the shadows. It wouldn't be the last time this happened. And he wasn't the only one. This is the story of a gang who turned dating apps into hunting grounds, and how they used charm, deception, and violence to steal over £100,000 before the police finally caught up with them. They didn't start with violence, not straight away. At first, it was about building something that looked real, profiles created on dating apps, casual bios, a few filtered photos, no names that could be traced, just enough to start a conversation or enough to build trust. The platform they chose was Grindr. Its location-based system made it easy to find nearby users and even easier to manipulate who saw what. One by one, they began targeting men who lived alone or who were open about their sexuality. These weren't random pics. They were looking for people who might not report what happened, people they believed were less likely to go to the police. Behind the fake profiles were 5 young men, all in their early 20s, all from Birmingham. At the center of the operation, Demalji Hadza was 21. He lived on Erskine Street in the Neckles area and was one of the first to admit guilt when the trial began. Detectives believe he played a central role in planning the operation, managing some of the Grindr accounts and arranging the meetings that would later turn into ambushes. His involvement ran deep, from digital setup to physical presence. Abu Bakr al-Azawi, also 21, came from Baverstock Road in Druids Heath. Like Hadza, he pleaded guilty early in the trial. Footage captured him withdrawing stolen money from cash points and spending it in shops, often just hours after an attack. He was present at multiple robberies and is thought to have helped coordinate the movement of stolen funds. Ali Hassan, just 20 years old, was from Albert Road in Losells. He denied all charges but was found guilty after a 5-week trial. Victim accounts placed him at the heart of some of the most aggressive encounters, restraining, threatening, and physically assaulting those targeted. Wasim Omar, 24, lived on Wardlow Road. The oldest of the 5, Omar was a consistent presence across the gang's activity, from driving between locations to taking part in the attacks themselves. Prosecutors described him as deeply embedded in the group's structure, someone who carried out orders and enforced silence. Then there was Mohammed Sharif, 22, from Keir Court in Bordesley Green. He too denied involvement, but was convicted alongside the others. In several incidents, he was linked to follow-up coordination, using phones, checking victim profiles, and identifying new targets after each robbery. The operation grew quickly. What began as isolated targeting became a repeatable pattern. Profiles were deleted and replaced. Messages sent in bulk. Sometimes they'd pretend to be different people within the same conversation, switching tone or language to make the setup feel more natural. Each message was a calculated move, not to flirt, but to study how much the person shared, whether they had a car, what hours they kept, whether they lived alone. Every detail helped refine the next approach. It was never really about dating, it was always about leverage. And over time, they stopped relying solely on Grindr. They expanded to other platforms, other tactics. But the core remained the same. The messages always led somewhere quiet, a park or a street just out of reach of CCTV. In some cases, they choose car parks as well, places where no one would notice a group of men waiting in the shadows. Golden Hillock Park in South Birmingham became a recurring location. Set back from main roads, partially unlit at night, it gave the gang cover. Victims were lured there under the pretense of a casual meetup. But what they found instead was a setup. The moment they arrived, movement came from the dark. Figures stepped out with hidden faces. No introductions, just orders, sharp and immediate. In some cases, they were told to stay in place long after the gang had left, or face being stabbed. But the parks weren't the only hunting grounds. In Derby, they changed their approach. We will discuss it later in this video. Then there were the clubs. On Broad Street in Birmingham, a man was targeted outside Reflex nightclub. He'd been drinking and felt unsteady. A stranger offered him a lift home, but when he got in the car, he wasn't alone. The others were already inside and waiting for their next target. He would wake up hours later, back at home, surrounded by the same men, with no clear memory of how he got there. The gang used location as leverage. Each place was chosen for a reason, as we discussed earlier. It gave them control and time to maneuver, and for their victims, it left nowhere to run. Each ambush had a different setup, but once the trap closed, the goal was always the same: money. On 25th April 2023, two men were walking home from a nightclub in Derby when they were waved down on Marketing Street. One of the gang claimed he was injured. Another said their car had broken down. As the men stepped in to help, they were dragged into a grassy verge and surrounded. Knives were drawn. They were robbed at knifepoint. Phones, wallets, and the PIN codes to both. Only £200 in cash was taken. But the gang wasn't after just physical wallets. They wanted full access, and they were just getting started. A few weeks later, another man at Grindr agreed to meet someone he believed was called Noah at the Golden Hillock Sports Ground car park in Birmingham. 3 of the gang were waiting. He was assaulted, threatened with a knife, and ordered to hand over his phone and unlock it. They stole £8,730 from his bank accounts and credit cards. Then they took his phone and his car. As they left, they told him to stay in the park for an hour, or he'd be stabbed. The same car park became a repeat hunting ground. On the 11th of May, a cyclist was flagged down by a man claiming his mother had been stabbed. As he reached to help, 3 others emerged with knives. He was forced to the ground and robbed. His phone, his wallet, all gone. By late May, they were refining the method. Another man was lured to the same Golden Hillock car park, again under the pretense of a Grindr date. More than £5,000 was taken from his accounts. The gang also left with his van. Just weeks later, on the 11th of July, the same trap was used again. Another victim arrived at the car park. Another promise of a date turned to the same ambush. This time, they took over £20,000, drained directly from his bank account at knifepoint. But the most brutal assault came when one man, thinking he was meeting another Grindr user, was punched and pinned to the ground. His shoulder was dislocated in the attack. He was forced to unlock his phone using facial recognition. They accessed his bank, demanded PINs, and stole over £25,000. Then made him call the bank and pretend the transfer was legitimate. As he was held captive, others left with his cards, withdrawing cash from ATMs across the city. Each robbery was part of a system, calculated, fast, ruthless. And by the end of it all, between 25th April 2023 and 15th July 2023, the defendants stole £73,406.10 from 8 victims. For months, the gang assumed their victims wouldn't talk. That shame, fear, or distrust of the police would keep them quiet. But they were wrong. The first real shift came when a victim, whose name was never made public, walked into a police station after being held for hours and humiliated. That disclosure gave detectives a start point. From there, more reports came in. It was enough to launch a full-scale investigation. And slowly, the operation behind the attacks began to unravel. For weeks, they stayed ahead. No fingerprints, no names or calls that could be traced. Victims were too dazed to remember much. But in the background, a slow build was underway. What began as a few scattered attacks quickly revealed a method. Every location carried the same signs, fake profiles, calculated threats, and a clear routine once the robbery began. From Golden Hillock Park to quiet streets in Derby to late-night encounters near Broad Street, the settings varied, but the approach remained the same. The speed at which the victim's money disappeared. It was too consistent to be a coincidence. CCTV became key. Footage placed the suspects at petrol stations, cash points, and corner shops just hours after the robberies. They were caught on camera withdrawing cash from victims' accounts or using their stolen cards to make contactless purchases. Reports confirm that at least one video showed them laughing and joking as they left a shop after a theft. Detectives cross-checked transaction logs with mobile data. Phones used in the ambushes, mostly disposable, were pinged to the same cell towers where victims were lured. One of the devices used to lure a victim to Golden Hillock was traced back to an area in Birmingham linked to one of the suspects. Another mistake helped close the net. After a robbery in Derby, Abu Bakr al-Azawi reportedly sent a photo of another potential victim to Mohammed Sharif, commenting on a necklace and confirming the man lived alone. The photo had been taken just 8 hours after they returned to Birmingham. That digital link became critical. Forensics also played a role. One attacker left DNA on a piece of clothing recovered from a car used in one of the abductions. Inside the vehicle, rented under a fake name, police found gloves, masks, and items matching victim descriptions. By March 2024, police were ready. Coordinated raids took place across Birmingham and Derby. 5 men were arrested: Damalji Hadza, Abu Bakr al-Azawi, Ali Hassan, Wasim Omar, and Mohammed Sharif. Each was later charged with conspiracy to commit robbery, assault, and hate crimes. They hadn't left much behind, but in the end, it was their confidence that broke the case. For the victims, the attacks didn't end when the gang walked away. Many were left dealing with fractured bones, dislocated joints, and missing money. But it was the psychological fallout that proved harder to measure. Several reported ongoing anxiety, depression, and isolation. A few told police they could no longer bring themselves to use dating apps at all. What once felt like connection now felt like risk. Support networks stepped in. LGBTQ+ charities and victim support services worked alongside police to ensure the case didn't disappear quietly. In court, prosecutors acknowledged how the gang specifically targeted men who might be reluctant to come forward. That targeting, rooted in manipulation and shame, made the case not just violent, but deeply personal. Calls soon followed for dating platforms to tighten safety protocols. Users were urged to report suspicious behavior, share locations with friends before meeting strangers, and make use of verification tools. Police across the country, including the Met, launched wider appeals, warning that other groups may be using similar tactics. And the warnings weren't unfounded. By the time the Birmingham case reached court, police forces were reviewing over 50 similar robberies across England, many involving LGBTQ+ victims and many following the same playbook. Encrypted chats, fake meetups, isolated spots, financial wipeouts. Some victims in those cases had not yet come forward. Others, investigators feared, may never do so. Before the case could close, officers made one final appeal. If you've experienced something similar, come forward, whether it was in Birmingham, Derby, London, or beyond. Because this wasn't just a local issue, it was a pattern. And it was spreading. But before the scale of that pattern could be addressed, the gang still had to answer for what they had already done in front of a judge. It came to a head on 13th of January 2025 inside Birmingham Crown Court. For the first time, all 5 men sat in the dock together, just weeks of evidence laid out before them. Footages, call logs, along with the victim statements, transaction trails. The prosecution didn't overplay it. This was an organized campaign. They chose victims they believed wouldn't go to the police. They used threats, violence, and digital manipulation to strip them of money, property, and security. Sentencing began with Damalji Hadza. Just 21, he was handed 16 years and 2 months. Then came Abu Bakr al-Azawi, 21, was sentenced to 16 years and 5 months. Ali Hassan, 20, the youngest member, received 16 years and 9 months. Wasim Omar, 24, received the longest sentence, 17 years and 3 months. Last was Mohammed Sharif, 23 years old, received 12 years. Together, they were handed nearly 80 years behind bars. But for those they targeted, the damage couldn't be measured in years. What do you make of it? Did the sentencing go far enough? Or was it too late for those already scarred by what happened? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want more real UK crime stories like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll keep digging. There's always another case to uncover.